December 2025. A grand auditorium in Russia. A banknote is unveiled in front of the world's leaders. The flags of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are engraved on the note. This is not just any paper money. This is a weapon that could destroy the US dollar's monopoly that has lasted for the past 80 years. It is called the unit. While the dollar is triumphant in the global economy, a huge alliance has quietly formed behind the scenes. Almost half of the world's population and 3/4 of the total mineral resources are now in the hands of this alliance. To the European Parliament. There is now a panic everywhere. Donald Trump is threatening 100% tariffs on Arab countries. On the other hand, China and Russia are working to build an economic stronghold designed to withstand Western sanctions. Turning the pages of history, we see that today's world-shaking alliance was born almost silently. In 2001, when the famous economist of Goldman Sachs, G. Monell, first used the word BRIC, he could not have imagined that these initials would one day break the interests of the Western Empire like the G7. At that time, it was just an idea for investors, where Brazil, Russia, India and China were seen as the emerging players of the future. But when the leaders of these countries sat down at the same table for the first time in Ekaterinburg, Russia in 2009, the world realized that this was no longer limited to the economy. It was becoming a huge geopolitical power. Initially, many despised the alliance. But after South Africa joined in 2010, BRIC became BRICS, but the real game-changer moment came on January 1, 2024. Ignoring the Western world's glare, powerful countries like Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates officially joined the group. And in 2025, with the addition of Asian giant Indonesia, BRICS is no longer an alliance of 5 or 6 countries. Instead, it has evolved into BRICS Plus. So why is BRICS seen as such a significant challenge to the West? The answer lies in its sheer scale and strategic global position. Today, BRICS nations account for roughly 36% of the world's total land area and about 46% of the global population, meaning nearly 1 out of every 2 people on Earth lives in a BRICS country. But more important than numbers is wealth. The key to the world economy is oil, or fuel, which is now in the hands of BRICS. With energy superpowers like Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and Russia coming under one umbrella, this alliance now controls about 44% of the world's total crude oil production. Not only that, but the lifeblood of 21st century technology is said to have about 72% of its rare earth minerals under the soil of the BRICS countries. From smartphones to electric cars and even fighter jet chips, America and Europe now have to look to China or the BRICS countries. In economic terms, the BRICS have now surpassed the G7. Judging by purchasing power parity, PPP, the BRICS now account for about 39% of the world's GDP. Meanwhile, the share of the G7 economies is steadily declining. According to many economists, by 2050, China and India are expected to surpass the United States and Europe as the world's largest economic powers. But the rise of BRICS is not just about economics, it's deeply rooted in geopolitics. If you look closely, the geographic positioning of its new members reveals a strategic pattern that cannot be ignored. Egypt controls the Suez Canal, which is the lifeline of world trade. On the other hand, Iran and the Emirates control the Strait of Hormuz, through which 1/5 of the world's oil is transported. This means that the BRICS can now turn off the lights of world trade if they want. For a long time, institutions like the World Bank and the IMF have been carrying out America's unwritten rule. There was little opportunity for developing countries to speak. But BRICS has now become the voice of the global south or the developing world. BRICS is sending a clear message that the world order that America created after World War II has expired. Now is the time for a multilateral or multipolar world, where Western bigotry will no longer prevail. Will this new equation really succeed, or will BRICS lose its way in conflicts among itself? The strategy that BRICS has adopted to break the monopoly of the dollar in world trade is not limited to economics alone, rather, it is a fight for survival against the Western world system. But why did de-dollarization or the abandonment of the dollar suddenly become necessary? The answer lies in the international payment system called SWIFT. Although this Brussels-based organization seems neutral at first glance, the influence of the US Federal Reserve and the G10 countries on it is unquestionable. Whenever America wants to punish a country, they use SWIFT as a weapon. An example of this is 2012. When 30 Iranian banks were cut off from SWIFT, the country's oil export revenue fell by about 50%. And 30% of its foreign trade was frozen. Similarly, Russia realized that relying on the dollar was a noose after it annexed Crimea in 2014. And when hundreds of billions of dollars in Russian reserves were seized after the Ukraine war, the message to the BRICS alliance was clear. To preserve their economic sovereignty, they have to create an alternative to the dollar. These people have created their own payment system SPFS in Russia, which currently has 557 banks connected. On the other hand, China launched CIPS in 2015, which has completed transactions worth about 80 trillion yuan or $12.8 trillion by 2021. These parallel systems are effectively declaring war on SWIFT's monopoly. However, BRICS' real trump card is the symbolic currency known as the unit, unveiled at the 2025 Russia summit. Unlike traditional fiat money that can be printed freely, this is designed with a structured backing that sets it apart from the dollar. Around 40% of its value is tied to gold, while the remaining 60% is linked to the local currencies of BRICS nations, collectively referred to as R5. This hybrid foundation is what aims to make it more stable and credible. That is, the Brazilian real, the Russian ruble, the Indian rupee, the Chinese renminbi and the South African rand. An unprecedented competition to collect gold is going on behind the scenes to strengthen this new currency system. Statistics say that China and India have bought about 572.5 tons of gold together in the 5 years from 2019 to 2024. Currently, the BRICS countries have a total gold reserves of more than 6,143 tons, which is about 12.9% of their total reserves, whereas in 2020 it was only 6.4%. That is, BRICS is shifting their reserves from dollars to gold at a very fast pace. Meanwhile, BRICS is ready to challenge the dollar in the digital world as well as in the paper notes. They are bringing BRICS Pay, a blockchain-based payment system. It is not under the control of a single country but a decentralized system. As a result, the extra 3 to 5% cost from dollar conversion fees in trade could be eliminated. The benefits are already becoming visible. For instance, trade between China and Russia using local currencies has reduced transaction costs by around 2 to 3%. Similarly, nearly 30% of trade between China and Brazil is now conducted through currency swap agreements instead of relying on the dollar. All in all, the multi-pronged attack of the BRICS, on the one hand the gold-based unit, on the other hand the digital BRICS pay and trade in local currencies, is an ominous sign for the global reign of the dollar. The new financial structure of the BRICS is paving the way for the permanent victory over the fear that America has ruled the world with the threat of economic blockade or sanctions. It was predictable that Washington, D.C. would not remain silent after hearing this repeated talk of the BRICS and the unit currency. However, since Donald Trump's return to the White House for a second term, the U.S. response has gone beyond simple diplomatic criticism. It has increasingly taken on the tone of economic confrontation. The Trump administration no longer views BRICS as just a coalition of developing nations. Instead, it sees it as a serious challenge to America's national security. In order to prevent the collapse of the global dominance of the dollar if the BRICS really launched their own currency, Trump has directly threatened to impose a 100% tariff or tariff on the goods of the BRICS Plus countries if they go ahead with the creation of their own currency. Not only that, Trump has also warned that countries that show solidarity with the so-called anti-American policies of the BRICS will also face a 10% tariff. However, the biggest victim of the threat has been America's longtime strategic ally India. Meanwhile, in a geopolitical twist, the Trump administration recently imposed a 50% tariff on India, the highest in the world. It was alleged that India was indirectly financing Russia in the Ukraine war by buying oil from Russia. However, very recently, the Trump administration announced that it would reduce this tariff on India from 50% to 18% on the condition that it buys oil from America and Venezuela instead of Russia. America has even pulled out of the International Solar Alliance, ISA, led by India. This is a major diplomatic blow for New Delhi. The current share of BRICS has fallen on South Africa, which is an American thorn in the side. A 30% tariff has been imposed on South African products. The situation became more murky when Trump claimed that a systematic killing of white farmers in South Africa or white genocide is going on, which has brought relations between Pretoria and Washington to a standstill. On the other hand, these 5 blows of America are not limited to the economic field. They have also spread to military and intelligence activities. Even more shocking is the fact that the US military has carried out unprecedented events such as kidnapping Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife from Caracas, and Trump has publicly announced the seizure of Venezuela's vast oil fields. The Trump administration is even threatening to take military action against countries like Cuba, Colombia, and Iran. The main goal of this aggressive attitude of America is one: to prevent the rise of BRICS at any cost. But the interesting thing is that Trump's tariff aggression or tariff war is actually making the BRICS alliance stronger. Seeing this uncertain behavior of America and the tendency to use the dollar as a weapon, the BRICS member countries are now realizing more and more that developing an alternative system to the dollar is no longer a luxury but a necessity for survival. This pressure from Washington is actually encouraging the BRICS countries to increase trade in local currencies among themselves and to stockpile gold, which could become a boomerang for America's long-term interests. Is the BRICS as strong as it seems from the outside? Or is the saying that the outside is a mess, the inside is a mess? In fact, the existential crisis of the BRICS is not a Western power. Rather, its biggest weakness lies in the mutual distrust of the member countries themselves. The two main pillars of this tangle are India and China. Although they are neighbors, their relationship is like a snake's web. There is a long-standing border dispute on the Himalayan border. Recent events have added new fuel to this. Although Modi and Xi Jinping met at the Kazan summit and diplomatic efforts to normalize relations have been made, the real picture is different. Meanwhile, tensions started rising again when an Indian citizen born in Arunachal Pradesh was detained for 18 hours at the Shanghai airport. China has always claimed Arunachal Pradesh as its territory. This incident proves that the mountain of mistrust between the two countries is still intact behind the diplomatic smiles. Moreover, India also has strong objections to China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative (BRI). Beijing wants to use BRICS to expand its infrastructure projects in Central Asia and the Indian Ocean region. But India has been opposing this project from the beginning. This is because it is seen as a strategic move by China to expand its global influence. The extent of this divide became clear during the 2026 Will for Peace naval exercise. While China, Russia, and Iran took part with their warships in the large-scale drill off the coast of South Africa, India, a founding member of BRICS, firmly declined to participate. Brazil, on the other hand, kept only a minimal presence as an observer. India clearly does not want BRICS to become an anti-American military alliance. The core of India's foreign policy is balance. On the one hand, it wants to be the leader of the global South. On the other hand, its strategic trade relations with America are deep. Therefore, Delhi has no intention of provoking Washington by participating in a military showdown led by China and Russia. On the other hand, the issue of BRICS expansion or inclusion of new members has also become a thorn in the side of the alliance. Pakistan has been trying to become a member of the BRICS Development Bank or New Development Bank, NDB, for a long time. But since India is the chair of BRICS this year, it is impossible for India to allow its archenemy Pakistan to enter this bank. As a result, it goes without saying that the process of Pakistan's membership will not be smooth. Not only India-Pakistan or India-China, but also the new members have old disputes. Iran and Saudi Arabia, these two arch-rivals in the Middle East, are now members of the same alliance. Although their relations have improved somewhat with the mediation of China, old wounds can flare up again at any moment. Similarly, the dispute between Egypt and Ethiopia over the sharing of Nile water could spark new tensions at the BRICS table. Economic disparities are a major obstacle to the unity of the alliance. Statistics show that the main driving force of the BRICS economy is China. While China's GDP is about $17 trillion, the GDP of other member countries is less than $3 trillion. China's economy is about 6 times larger than India's. Due to this huge gap, small economies always fear that BRICS will eventually become China's private club. Even the financial instruments created by BRICS are not yet fully operational. For example, the Contingent Reserve Arrangement, CRA, was created as an alternative to the IMF. But according to its rules, if a country wants to borrow more than 30% of its quota, it has to comply with the conditions of the IMF. Because of this strange rule, South Africa in 2020 was forced to turn to the IMF for help, not the BRICS. All in all, BRICS stands at a juncture where it will either become a future superpower Or it will become an ineffective alliance in its own right. Since there is no specific binding policy among the member countries, these teething problems or initial problems can eventually become big. India's position in the BRICS Mahayajya can be described in one word as walking on a tightrope. On the one hand, the desire to become a leader in the global south or the developing world. On the other hand, maintaining strategic relations with America. Standing between these two, India is playing a complex chess move. India knows very well that it is important to use the BRICS platform to compete with China. Again, it is not possible for anyone to completely throw away the dollar to save its economy. Delhi has chosen its digital currency or CBDC as the main tool of this two-pronged strategy. The Reserve Bank of India, RBI, is making its digital currency or euro suitable for international trade in a very well-planned manner. This digital currency, which started its journey in 2022, is no longer in the experimental stage. According to the statistics of March 2025, the number of users of euro has crossed 6 million, and an average of more than 5 lakh transactions are being made on this platform every month. Currently, euro worth more than 1,000 crore rupees is in circulation in the Indian market, which was only 234 crore rupees a year ago. The Indian government is now looking to bring this digital infrastructure to the BRICS stage. The Reserve Bank of India is going to present a revolutionary proposal at the BRICS summit to be held in India in 2026. The proposal is to link the central bank digital currencies or CBDCs of the BRICS member countries to each other. India believes that it is much more practical and secure to trade through the digital currencies of their respective countries than to introduce a single common currency or BRICS currency. This approach could reduce reliance on the dollar while helping preserve financial sovereignty. However, what's interesting is that India remains just as cautious as China or Russia when it comes to calls for de-dollarization or a full boycott of the dollar. The Indian government has made it clear that being part of BRICS does not mean abandoning the dollar-based system altogether. New Delhi understands that a significant portion of its IT sector and export revenue depends on markets in the United States and Europe. For that reason, taking an aggressive stance against the dollar could pose serious risks to India's economic stability. That is why India has chosen a middle path. Instead of outright abandoning the dollar, it is increasing transactions in local currencies through bilateral trade agreements with countries like the United Arab Emirates and Indonesia. Through this, it is diversifying its reserves by bypassing the dollar's monopoly, but is also not engaging in direct conflict with the United States. According to analyst Horsepanth, India does not want BRICS to become an anti-American military bloc. Participating in a military bloc led by China and Russia means damaging relations with Washington, which New Delhi does not want at the moment. Moreover, with new members of BRICS plus like Iran and Egypt having different agendas, India feels that militarization of the alliance is neither possible nor appropriate. In other words, India is using BRICS to increase its bargaining power. They are promoting the digital rupee as an alternative to the dollar. But they are not ready to sound the death knell for the dollar. All in all, ahead of the 2026 summit, India is positioning itself to be a bridge between the East and the West. While China is using BRICS as a shield against America, India sees BRICS as a stepping stone to expand its global influence. Now the question is, can BRICS really create a new world order? Analysts say the dollar will not collapse overnight. But there is no way to deny that the BRICS check is also creating a parallel financial system or parallel economic system. If the unit currency is successfully launched and the BRICS space system is effective, 15 to 20% of world trade could be in this new currency within the next decade. Then the combination of the dollar, the euro and the unit will create a multifaceted world order. However, this vision depends heavily on strong unity among member nations. If major powers like China and India fail to overcome their differences and move forward together, the grand ambitions of BRICS could easily collapse like a house of cards.